Hi everybody, today we return to the field of quantum mechanics and we're going to discuss one of the most famous thought experiments in all of physics called Schrödinger's cat. Now first, why are we going to discuss this thought experiment and then what is it? Well, you remember in the last video we discussed the weird world of quantum mechanics, whereas particles are simultaneously particles and waves, and that you can interpret quantum systems that are very, very small, as probability waves. In other words, until you make an observation, they can be anywhere or in any state. There's a probability for it. And then when you make the observation, it's known as collapsing the wave function, localizing them to a particular point in space and with particular physical properties. That's the quantum world, the world of uncertainty and probabilities. But the world around you is not that. It is not what you observe. You do not see desks and chairs magically appearing in different places according to probability waves. You can't walk through walls, and so on and so forth. So the world that we see around us is nothing like the quantum world. And therefore, there's a natural question to ask, when does it stop being quantum and start being normal? And that's effectively what Schrödinger's cat is about. Now let me describe to you the experiment itself. It's not the most friendly experiment for pet lovers, but such as it is, this is what it is. Basically, you put a cat in a sealed box, and then there's a vial of poison, and there's a radioactive isotope. Radioactive isotopes, they decay with a probability, so you never know when they've decayed or not. There's just a probability around whether they'll decay. If the isotope decays, it effectively breaks the poison vial, which kills the cat. And then you seal the box. From the perspective of an outside observer, he or she does not know, of course, whether the radioactive isotope has decayed, and therefore does not know whether the cat is alive or dead. In a quantum interpretation, therefore, you have no information about the system inside, you have not made an observation, and therefore the whole system must be a probability wave. In other words, the cat must be in what we call a superposition of states, of both dead and alive, or as some people have put it, the cat is simultaneously both dead and alive. This is what a probability state means. Now, this causes a lot of problems, right? Because whilst it may be fine for me to talk about electrons or tiny, tiny particles being probability waves, when I start to talk about a cat being alive or dead as a probability wave, that seems highly counterintuitive. And what if it wasn't a cat? What if it was a human being that you put in that box? Can you really be in a state that's both alive and dead? It just seems crazy. So what's going on here? Well, in the Copenhagen interpretation, basically you have to make the observation to break the wave function, right? And so the cat is alive or dead until someone looks at it. But this obviously has major flaws. Why does it have to be a human observer that breaks down a wave function? What do we mean by observe? Right? Does it have to be a human? Probably not. The cat could count as a sentient animal, or can an inanimate object count? And there's a bunch of kit in that box. There's a Geiger counter probably, there's a radioactive isotope, there's a vial of poison. Does all of this, does this count as an observation? What it tells us is that the Copenhagen interpretation of quantum mechanics, that things become classical or normal as you make an observation, no longer probabilistic because you've made an observation, rests on the definition of what we mean by observation, and that's extremely unclear. So what actually is happening here, the Schrödinger cat paradox, or the thought experiment, is telling us, well, can the Copenhagen interpretation really tell us when the quantum world ends and the classical or normal world begins? And the answer is, there are lots of problems with it. So why is it that we don't see something like Schrödinger's cat? Why don't we in our ordinary lives see superpositions of probability waves in ordinary objects and ourselves? The actual answer to this question is not some clever philosophical argument, but is called quantum decoherence. What is quantum decoherence? Yet another term. Well, basically it's why you don't see macroscopic objects as probability waves. It's why effectively the world is as we see it. The fact is that there's stuff all around us. All of this stuff as probability waves, it interferes with each other and it breaks the quantum systems. It breaks those superpositions of states. In that box with the cat, there's lots of stuff. The cat itself is billions and billions of molecules. You've got a Geiger counter, you've got the poison, you've got the radioactive isotope. All of that interferes together and collapses those wave functions. And that essentially is why the world looks how it is. And in fact, observing probability waves from quantum particles is not that easy. It took a lot of effort, in fact, to actually show these probability waves for relatively small systems. And therefore the answer is quantum decoherence. That's why the world looks how it does to us. And that's why the Schrödinger's cat situation, the superposition of dead and alive, is probably not ever going to be experimentally realized. So for all of you that are wondering why you don't see probability waves and quantum mechanics in your daily life, this is the answer. The answer was from the Schrödinger's cat experiment. You have to go to the very small and quite isolated systems in order to see some of the weirdest and wackiest quantum behaviors.